Everyone, well, here we go. This is the first update for the winter of 2016 from GazOverVids.com over the next few weeks up to the end of November. We're going to, on a weekly basis, be looking at various things. I talked about the methodology in the video last week. We're going to be looking at things like ENSO, solar activity, how quickly the snow cover spreads across Siberia, all that kind of thing. And eventually it's all going to build up, as well as season models, eventually it's all going to build up to the actual forecast, which will be released at GazOverVids.com probably right at the very end of November or the start of December. I haven't actually penciled in the date yet, but it'll be somewhere around the 30th of November, the 1st of December, something like that. So these will be ongoing and weekly. It's going to be a storyline that will build up through the autumn as we do this. I hope you enjoy the ride. It's going to be a bit of a bumpy ride, I think, as we go along, but eventually we will get there and we'll get to an actual forecast. Now, bringing on with that, just very quickly to mention the ads. GazOverVids.com is a commercial enterprise, so if you could have browsed through the ads, particularly the link widgets, and click through them. If there's any articles that you're interested in, you'll be able to go off and read that article. And of course, you're going from GazOverVids to where that article is, we get a revenue fee on what you do. Thanks so much for doing that. There'll sometimes be video ads as well, opening out within the content, then closing back up again when you've watched them. So thanks so much for getting involved, and thanks for doing that. I want to start off this very first update talking a little bit about the OPI, the October Pattern Index. This was a big, I'm sure you remember it, this was a big thing last year when we did the updates last year. I want to talk a little bit about that, and I'll get onto it towards the end of the video. But let's start off with really where we began, not in terms of the winter updates, but where we began early in the year, talking about El Nino, because El Nino is a big factor. It's going to be the factor probably for this winter. It'll be the background signal, whatever it means for us. The El Nino will be there. So let's very quickly start off talking about that. And we have reached the required El Nino threshold, as I've mentioned in the regular El Nino updates I've been doing on a month-by-month basis. There is very much a defined sort of criteria to get an El Nino, if you like. So you have to have a temperature anomaly going at least to plus 5 of a degree above average. So that's like the minimum, 0.5 Celsius above average. Anything above that, of course, is okay, but anything below that, no, you're not in an El Nino. And it has to be over 5 tri-monthly periods as well. So it can always be a little bit of a job, actually, but certainly with weaker El Ninos, ever getting them designated and recognised officially, because sometimes you don't quite reach the required temperature, or sometimes it doesn't quite measure over those 5 tri-monthly periods. Anyway, we've done it for this El Nino now. So, I showed you this graph, I think it was on the last El Nino update. Just want to start with this. Really, these red numbers in the boxes are telling us when we've got El Nino events going on. So, for example, we've got the 2002-2003 event just here, indicated by these red numbers. And again, 2009... 2010 El Nino is just there, indicated by those red numbers. Well, we've got 5 red numbers, or 5 red numbers within 5 boxes appeared now for 2015. This is our year just here, and we can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 red numbers. So we are now officially within a designated and recognised El Nino. The last number coming out at plus 1.2 Celsius for the tri-monthly period of June, July and August takes us to that recognised El Nino threshold. Interestingly, the last time we was this warm at this point within an El Nino was back in 1997. Actually, it's a little bit warmer at plus 1.4 Celsius with that temperature anomaly. So it implies it's going to be a big event. I don't think it will be a record break because we're not beating at this stage anyway, we're not beating where we was at this point in 1997. You can see what I mean. So if we was going to beat 97, 98, which is the strongest El Nino recorded, then you would probably expect us to be a little bit above where we was at this point, this tri-monthly point, in 1997. So I don't think we're going to beat 97, 98 for this El Nino. Nevertheless, it's going to be quite a strong event, I would think. So this is the latest sea surface temperature anomaly map for the globe. We'll be having a look at this very regularly through these winter updates. This, of course, is the El Nino just here. Going to be a very big El Nino event. You can see how warm it is through the central part of the equatorial Pacific. I don't think it'll be a record breaker, but it'll be at least a moderate event, possibly a strong or even a very strong event. We will continue to monitor it through the autumn. Interestingly, notice it is cooling here a little bit over towards the eastern part of the equatorial Pacific, over on the Peruvian side. If you, as I've explained in the El Nino updates, if you get it cooler here and then warmer here, what you've got is a central base Modoki or Modaiki El Nino, and when that happens, it can be a signal, certainly for a colder winter in America, sometimes for a colder signal for us as well. So we'll be very much watching this through the course of the autumn to see whether this Modaiki central base El Nino really starts to gather pace. But I think we are seeing the first indications that it's all beginning to well up in the central part of the equatorial Pacific and maybe cool down a bit over towards the eastern side. We've still got this warm water up here. Perhaps it's cooling a little bit compared to the last couple of winters. We'll keep watching this because this has been a big factor, I think, this warmth within the northeastern Pacific Ocean. This has been quite a big factor in the pattern that's been setting up in America over the past 2 winters. You know, all of the ridging that's been happening in the northwest of America, which has sort of sent the jet stream, or been tending to send the jet stream on a northwest-southeast trajectory and producing sort of a trough within the north and the east, a trough of low pressure. So that pushes the cold air down from Canada. A lot of that, I think, has been tied up with this warm water we've had here in the northeastern part of the Pacific Ocean. It's still pretty warm there, but it probably isn't quite as warm as it has been over the past couple of years at this point. So we'll have a look at this in more depth in another video as we progress through the autumn. We'll keep watching it, but I do think it's a little bit, not cool by any means, don't get me wrong, not yet anyway. I think it probably will be by this time next year, but at the moment it isn't cool up here, but it is probably a little bit cooler compared to the last couple of years. But I will look at that in much more depth, I think, in a future video. We've got a lot of these to do over the next few weeks, so we can't look at everything all at once. We've got to keep things back and have a look later on. The PDO is still generally warm. That's being seen by all this warmth that's going on just here. So we're in a warm PDO, albeit maybe seeing a little bit of a reduction taking place compared to where it was a few weeks and months ago. That's probably tied in with the cooling that's beginning to occur around here just a little bit. And then, of course, in the Atlantic, we know we've got this very cold North Atlantic situation at the moment in terms of those sea surface temperature anomalies. Again, I'll be looking at this in a later video to try and work out what the implications of the cold Atlantic are for our winter prospects. We haven't had this much cold to this strength probably since the early 1990s. There have been other years, but I've had sort of cold anomalies within the Atlantic, of course, but to have this much of it and so cold, probably you have to go back to the early 1990s to find a scenario like that. So we're going to have to do a little bit of digging around, a little bit of investigating to see what the implications of that could be. Obviously, if the winds are blowing from the west, if it's a westerly winter, let's say, with a positive NAO setup, and we've got that NAO forecast as our starting point, of course, that we did back in June, indicating a positive NAO. If we're getting the winds from the west, it means that it's probably still going to be a mild winter overall, but those westerlies will be colder than we've been used to probably over the past sort of 20 years. So cold zonality maybe is something we'll have to think about if it's a westerly winter. And I'm by no means saying that it will be a westerly winter at this stage, but if we do get a lot of westerlies this winter, that cold pool remains just to our west. Expect them to be colder than they would typically have been over the past couple of decades. Very much as this summer has panned out. Actually, it's been a pretty cool summer, to be honest. I think a lot of that is tied up with that cold Atlantic. Right, going off onto something completely different. Let's have a look at solar activity. This is the solar disk on our side of the disk today from solarham.net. And, well, there's not much to be seen, is there? It's virtually got a spotless sun, actually. Little spot just there and one just there, but you can hardly make it out. Otherwise, nothing really going on. And we have seen quite a big reduction in solar activity over the past few months, particularly as we've gone through this year. So we know that we got that second spike in activity at the start of 2014. I mean, since then it's been generally on a downwards trend. You can see that by this red trend line. By the way, this chart's been created by my good friend James Acrill, who supplies gas services with all the information regarding the solar activity. He's a bit of a solar expert, if you like. I know James will be watching this. Thanks very much for letting me use this graph, James. So we've been generally trending downwards, of course, in activity since the start of 2014, albeit it hasn't been linear. We have been getting spikes upwards whilst the general trend's been down. Now, where we are at the moment, and this is right updated up to August, we are just here. I'm not quite sure if you can make this out, but where this little red spot is, just here, that's where the sunspot number came out in August 2015, so the month that's just gone. And we're more or less back to this sort of zone just here in terms of solar activity, and that's where we was sort of second half of 2012, first half of 2013, before we got this second spike to the solar maximum in the second half of 2013. So we're more or less, get rid of all of that, we're more or less here where we are now, back to where it was in 2012, 2013. And we know 2012, 2013 was a cold winter, not a desperately cold winter, but it did get colder as it progressed and finished up with a very cold March. So we're back to that sort of level of activity. Now, we've been running very close to solar cycle 12, and I've been explaining this on the other updates that we've been doing in terms of the solar cycles. This solar cycle, 24, has been running very close to solar cycle 12. So what happened in solar cycle 12 is that there was one final fairly big spike upwards. And if we continue to follow, at some point, these are the dates here on the bottom of the graph, at some point in this sort of zone, we can expect one final push up in activity, albeit we won't get back here, we won't get back to where we was in the start of 2014, but we can probably expect one more pretty big push up in activity before we finally go down into solar minimum. That will occur, the final sort of solar minimum will occur around 2018 or 2019. Now, if this spike in activity occurs around the winter months, it could have an impact on the winter. So we're going to have to wait and see. I think definitely we are trending down into solar minimum, but just when this last spike, if it happens, may not happen, we may start to deviate from solar cycle 12, who knows, but if it does happen around the winter, we've got to be thinking a little bit about the impacts that will have. We'll continue to monitor solar activity, of course, as we progress through the autumn. Right, I better progress on because I've been talking far too much. So just quickly to mention Atlantic hurricane activity. This is one of the things that I like to look at because I think there is a connection, albeit probably not all that strong, but there is a slight connection between the strength of the hurricane season and how much blocking can occur later on in the winter. Essentially, hurricanes are dumping warmth from the tropics into the polar regions. And when you get lots of warmth via lots of hurricanes, being dumped in the Arctic, later on it can translate back towards an increased chance of Arctic blocking. So we'll keep an eye on this through the Arctic. It's very early days really for the hurricane season still, but so far we have had 7 total depressions, 6 tropical storms, 2 hurricanes, and 1 major Category 3 or above hurricane. Now, you remember the past couple of years have been very quiet with hurricane season. Last year, 2014, only had 2 major hurricanes, Category 3 or above. So we're already sort of halfway there to where we was last year, albeit we've only had 1 major hurricane, but we only had 2 last year. So we're halfway there to where we was last year. It's pretty early days as well. I would expect there'll be probably a little bit more in the way of hurricane activity to get through into October particularly. So let's wait and see what happens with that. But it could be a slightly more active season this year compared to the last couple of years, albeit I don't think it will be a massive season by any means. The El Nino will sort of dampen back down in terms of hurricane activity in the Atlantic. We're progressing into a westerly QBO. I want to talk about this in another video, but essentially what a QBO is telling you is that when you're westerly, which is indicated by these dark grey areas on this chart, when you've got a westerly QBO, you are strengthening the westerlies in the northern hemisphere. You're essentially strengthening the zonal westerly flow. Conversely, when the QBO goes easterly, this is quasi-biennial oscillation. By the way, try saying that when you've had a few. That's in these white areas just here. When the QBO is easterly, then you're weakening the zonal westerlies. So, in theory, when you're in an easterly QBO, when you was in one last winter, when you're in an easterly QBO, your chance of blocking of easterly winds and blocking off the westerly flow, the zonal flow, your chances increase. But it's by no means a guarantee of anything. And for instance, the last time we was transitioning from an easterly QBO to a westerly QBO, as we are now, you can see that by this dark grey area just appearing there. That's telling us that we're transitioning from easterly QBO to westerly QBO. The last time we was in that sort of situation was just here, and that is the winter of 2012-2013. So, very interestingly, we know that was a cold winter. It was transitioning into westerly QBO, presumably strengthening the zonal westerlies. Yet we managed to get a cold winter and a huge amount of blocking in the late winter period. So the QBO is by no means a guarantee to anything, and we will be discussing this a little bit more, certainly in one of the subsequent videos coming up. But the signal is going to be a transitioning westerly QBO for this winter. Now let's have a look at polar sea ice, Arctic sea ice, see how that's doing, and Siberian snow cover. Now there's not really much point in looking at Siberian snow cover yet because it's far too early, but this is the Siberian plain on our side of the Siberian plain right now, and there's hardly any snow really showing up, but it's only early September, so you wouldn't expect much really. There's a little splotch just there, and a few bits and pieces here and there, probably around mountainous areas, but really nothing happening on the Siberian plain in terms of snow cover just yet. By the end of October, all of this will be covered with snow, and how quickly that happens will be a factor that we'll be looking at. In terms of the Arctic, now this is quite interesting. This is the sea ice that is currently remaining. Actually, I think I'll change the colour there of the highlighter. This is the sea ice that is currently remaining in the North Pole at the moment, this yellow area. And you'll see it's been quite a big melt season this year. Didn't have much of a melt season last year. It's a better year for retaining sea ice in the Arctic. This year hasn't been as good. So this was the situation at this point in 2014. Notice we had already got a little bit more snow than we've got at the moment. But the main point I want you to look at for this update is how much ice we had at this point in 2014. So we had quite a lot of ice still remaining. But look how much worse it is this year. We're definitely having a much bigger melt season this year in terms of Arctic sea ice compared to what we had last year, and I think compared to 2013 as well. This is important because when you get a big Arctic melt season, it is one of the things that can maybe, and it's a little bit controversial this because it's a fairly new idea, but the idea is that when you get a big melt season, it can be an indicator that you're going to get blocking later on in the winter. This graph is showing us where we are in terms of total sea ice coverage compared to years going back to 2006. So the last really good year for retention of the Arctic sea ice was this red line just here. That's telling us where 2006 ended up. That was a good year for retaining sea ice. Every year since then, including last year, which was a better year, but every year since then has seen Arctic sea ice coming out less than 2006. So this line just here is 2014. That's last year. And that was a bad year, really. It was close to 2006. It wasn't quite as good as 06, but it was a better year. Now this just here is 2012. That's the worst year in terms of the ice that we've lost in the Arctic. So this is 2012 just here. That's sort of a death spiral type year. Now, where we are for this year, for 2015, is this black line. So obviously we haven't reached the total minimum of how much ice we're going to lose just yet. We've still got another week or maybe 10 days or so of ice loss to go before it sort of bottom out and start to come back up again, just because it's getting so cold in the North Pole by that point. But you can see it's a pretty bad year, really. We're in with this cluster just here, and the years are 2007. The other year is 2008, and I think we are also with 2011 as well. So three pretty bad years, particularly, of course, 2007. And when this green line happened, it was a huge shock. I'm sure you remember this. We were hearing a lot about death spirals and how the Arctic was going to be completely ice-free within a few years. And it was such a shock because we hadn't seen anything like it up to that point. But now it's not so much of a shock, really, because you can see we've had other years that have been as bad as this, and of course got this year, which also is as bad as this, albeit I don't think we'll get as bad as we did in 2012. We'll have another look at that in next week's update, when we may get the sort of minimum in terms of this ice melt season. But it's a pretty grim year, and if you sort of worry about this, and I do worry about this a little bit, of what's going on in the Arctic, if you do worry about this, it's been a pretty grim melt season this year. Whether it'll help our winter fate in terms of getting a cold winter is one thing, but the bigger picture, of course, is what's going on up in the North Pole. Before I go, I just want to mention the OPI a little bit. This is the October Pattern Index. Now, this was the in thing, I'm sure you remember. Last year we heard a huge amount about the OPI from the forecasters in Italy. I think it was an Italian-based idea. I don't know whether we will hear all that much about it this autumn. We'll have to wait and see. I was never all that sure, really, what it was supposed to be. Telling us. I think what it was telling us, and I went into this a little bit in a live broadcast that I did with Quantum. I'm not sure if you heard this, but what I think it was telling us was the pattern that was delivering the Siberian snow cover. We had a huge increase in Siberian snow cover last autumn. So this is last autumn's Siberian snow cover from the 1st of October to the 31st. So this is the Siberian plain just here. You notice on the 1st of October we already had quite a lot of snow there in the eastern part of Siberia. And look how quickly it sort of developed through the course of October. This is the 7th of October. This is the 12th of October. This is the 17th of October, my birthday. And this is the 22nd of October. And by the 22nd of October, it was virtually covered with snow across the whole of Russia, even in towards the far west of Russia. We've virtually got full snow cover. Now, I think what the OPI was telling us was the pattern that was delivering, if you like, that snow cover. It was a very negative number for the OPI. There it is, minus 12.12 was the final sort of finishing number. And the idea, I think, behind it was that when you've got a very negative number with the October pattern index, it's telling you that you've had a pattern over the North Pole and probably across Europe as well. You've had a pattern that has delivered that rapid increase in snow cover across Russia. In other words, you've had quite an extensive blocking pattern through October. Conversely, when you've got a positive October pattern index, you haven't had blocking over the pole. I think that's sort of the gist of the idea, but I was never all that certain about what it was suggesting. Anyway, the idea was that when it's negative, it should be a signal for a cold winter. Now, we know that the winter actually wasn't all that cold last winter. It was about average. This is Central England temperature from Trevor Harley's website. So December came out at 5.2, December 2014. January 2015, 4.4. February, 4.0. So it's a pretty coolish winter. It's about average really in terms of the Central England temperature. There was a little bit of snow at time, but it was nothing that you would sort of class as a cold winter. And the OPI signal sort of suggested that, well, this should really be a cold winter because you've had this negative number over the North Pole. You've had all of this blocking over the North Pole indicated by this negative number, and that's created this rapid influx of snow across the Russian plain. Now, because we didn't get a cold winter, a lot of people are now thinking that the whole thing needs to be junked and thrown away. I'm not really all that convinced about that. I do think that how quickly the snow cover builds up across Russia is important. It isn't the only factor. And despite that rapid build-up of snow cover across Russia that we had last October, the Gauss Weather Service's forecast for the winter of 2014-2015 was actually for sort of near normal temperatures. It was pretty good forecast. I was very pleased with how it panned out. So I didn't go for a cold winter, despite that big increase of snow across Russia. And there were several reasons for that, which I won't go into at the moment because I've gone on far too long. But what I'm trying to say is that because the OPI thing sort of fell apart a little bit last autumn, I don't think that's necessarily a reason to throw out the whole idea of snow cover, how quickly it develops across Russia being important. So that's sort of the thing that I'm trying to get across. And I don't know whether we'll hear any more about the OPI. We may do, it may come back with some more research this autumn. I'll be keeping my ear to the ground on that one. But I will continue to monitor, even if we don't hear anything about the OPI again, I will continue to monitor what's going on across Russia, because I think it's an important factor combined with all of the other things that I've talked about in this video. I certainly won't want to base a winter 15-16 forecast entirely on the idea of how quickly the snow builds up across Russia. I won't want to do that, but combined with the things, it is an important factor. I still think that's true, and we'll continue to look at it through the course of this autumn. Right, I've gone on far too long, so I hope you've found it interesting, you've stuck with it. This will be kept around the website for the rest of this season anyway, so if you couldn't watch it all in one sitting, don't worry, it'll be around the website through the rest of the season, so you can come back and watch it whenever you like on the winter forecast page. Right, that's it for now. Thanks for watching.